Hello, welcome to Cynic Critique, where we get real with cult films. I'm your host Brian, and I'm here with my brother and co-host, my bro-host, Thomas.
Hello.
This week it's a Halloween special, and we are accompanied by our friend Matt from Sitting Through the Credits as we discuss a horror film we have each selected that we feel is underrated and or underappreciated. First up is Thomas's pick, 2000's The Cell. My choice is 2003's Darkness Falls, and last but not least, Matt's choice with 2007's Dead Silence. Okay, so today we're joined by Matt from Sitting Through the Credits. I'll let him introduce himself and his podcast before we crack on.
Hi there, I'm Matt from Sitting Through the Credits. I run a podcast that just really likes to dig deep into the behind the scenes of filmmaking, how films were made, the history behind them, and all the people involved in the production. Currently on a bit of a hiatus, but my next project is Where Eagles Dare. So, come and join me over there and let's talk about film.
You'll be able to find his podcast in our show's episode description. So this week is a bit of a Halloween special, and we've each brought a horror film to the table to discuss. And I believe Thomas is his first in chronological order of release.
Yeah, I'll start us off with The Cell, 2000.
Do you believe there's a part of yourself that you don't show anybody? When I'm inside, I get to see those things. I feel them.
Directed by Tassim Singh, written by Mark Ortiz-Vick, starring Jennifer Lopez as Catherine Dean, Vince Vaughn as Peter Novak, Vincent D'Onofrio, Carl Stager, Colton James as Edward Baines, and Dylan Baker as Henry West. It was made on a budget of $33 million, and it grossed $104 million. And the synopsis reads, an FBI agent persuades a social worker who is adept with a new experimental technology to enter the mind of a comatose serial killer in order to learn where he has hidden his latest victim. This is one of my favourite films. What do you guys think?
So, this was a first-time watch for me, so I had no idea what this was going to be going in. And as you know, I did manage to watch the completely wrong movie beforehand. I managed to watch Cell rather than The Cell.
And how was that?
But it's a film that has a very bad reputation, but I was coming on here ready to defend it. But definitely not in the same league as The Cell. I thought this was a fascinating film, really. Very artistic, and enjoyed it all the more for not having any idea about it going in.
But as a horror film, how do you feel about it?
I think the other two films we're going to talk about later, they are more what you would traditionally expect from a horror film. For me, this was more psychological thriller. Obviously, there's the murder mystery, the detective element to it, but it's the visuals is where the horror is. I personally count Silence of the Lambs, which this is frequently compared to, as a horror movie. So if that is a horror movie, then The Cell certainly is as well.
Yeah, a little similar to Longlegs earlier this year, I guess, in that respect. As soon as it focuses on the actual brutality of the nature of the crimes, it seems to get called a horror more than it would if it was just a regular crime thriller, especially when the serial killer's doing strange killings and rituals.
Yeah, I think in comparison to the other two that we're going to come to, this film's got the biggest budget of the three, and just going into it from the very start, you could tell it's a lot more expansive in scope. You get that filming in Namibia. I immediately thought when watching it, is this a very elaborate advert for Lloyd's TSB with the black horse running across the desert? Yeah. Obviously that comes back later on. It's a recurring motif. But yeah, I mean, it's quite clear, I would say, that the audience is in the land of dreams and metaphor,
Really.
Yeah, and that's what, and that carries through. I was glad that carried through the film, and it definitely gets more surreal as it goes along. I was just curious, as it being one of Thomas's favourite films, what his first experience of it was and what drew him to it.
It was on late one night, probably like 11 o'clock really, and I thought, why not? I'll watch this. Vince Vaughn's it. And its visual style is something that really stuck with me, and I think that's one of the things that really makes it part of a horror. The visuals are quite dark and grim. So this was like my first choice when thinking of horror films. I think this is one of the most unsettling sort of things visually for some reason, or I did at the time. Now I seem to have become accustomed to it, which might be a bit strange.
It's definitely stuck with me since watching it, that's for sure. And I just can't help doing more research, to be honest, as to where certain visuals are coming from. I just find that endlessly fascinating. I wonder if that is partly because I am quite pretentious, though. I do like modern art, so just seeing where the inspirations have come from. Yeah, I just think it's worth it just for that alone.
Yeah. Well, one of your favourite artists is referenced in this anyway, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Who we mentioned last time we did our Alien podcast. So,
yeah.
Before you abandoned me in deep space to come back. But, I found my way back. Thankfully, thanks to the same artist. So I'm thanking Giga for that. So
You may have made it back, but I'm sorry to inform you, you're 79 years in the future and your children have passed.
oh no, I didn't know I had kids.
All the more tragic, maybe, I don't know.
What a plot twist. I do like the way this film plays with dreams and technology, though. How we cut from that very metaphorical landscape at the start, and then suddenly we're in the Institute with the technology. Is it the neurological cartography and synaptic transfer system device, which just rolls off the tongue?
Oh, so easy to remember.
I did.
The Matrix kind of does that, but in a completely different way and for a different purpose of cutting into the dreams.
Yeah, I hadn't put that together when I watched it, because it's just afterwards, isn't it?
Yeah. But The Matrix is something I think about, on a daily basis. I'll be honest, it's just one of my touchstone films. I think it's such an important touchstone in films from the point of its release to now, and it still has an effect.
It definitely entered popular culture much more than The Cell. I'd be lying if I said I'd heard of this film before Thomas brought it up.
Really?
Yeah, I've never heard of this.
Right. It does seem to have a bit more of a fan base on the undercurrent, if you know what I mean. It's not at the surface anymore. Well, I don't know if it ever was.
Nah.
I think I've definitely been indoctrinated into the cult. Maybe not the fetishistic and masochistic side of the cult, but definitely the film.
Yeah.
You sure?
Who's been talking?
Well, I was down at the local hardware shop earlier, and they said they saw you buying hooks.
With those 14 rings for my bag. We're not going to tell that. Yeah. As well as, no, I'm not going to say that. I do like the architectural side of it as well. So the film's Campbell Center in the film, that was actually the real Neurosciences Institute, the NSI, which is at La Jolla in San Diego, California. So those buildings received sort of architectural acclaim for their modernist style. And that was founded by the Nobel laureate Gerald Edelman. And when those buildings were commissioned in the early 90s, his goal was to realize his vision for a scientific monastery. So that really matches the themes of the film, where science isn't just cold, hard, and logical. It's more metaphysical, emotional, and open to interpretation, which I definitely enjoy that sort of thing.
Well chosen from the location scout for this film, then, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. Even down to the way that those suits, which I know you know a lot about, Brian, the way that they're sort of suspended like marionettes, much the same as Stargers, well, fantasies are realised later on. You've got that mirroring between sort of science and the dream world, and Stargers reality as well.
Yeah. What is it you were hinting at that I know about the suits?
Your favourite film, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula.
Yeah. It's the same costume designer, Biko Ishioka. They were the costume designer on Dracula, and these are basically a copy of the armour, if not reusing of the armour, but one of the models of it anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the armour design in Dracula, but I think it's used really well here with how the muscle contouring, isn't it? It really gives the idea of those muscles wanting to be somehow stimulated for the dreamscapes.
I really like that design myself. Although this time they're not falling apart as much, because for Dracula, that armor was just constantly falling to pieces. But as a design, it's immediately recognizable. I think one of the first things I did after I finished the film was Google that. Oh, yeah, of course it is.
See, this is the difference between us. I instantly thought, oh, that's very much like Lord Zed from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Which I did not work on.
I was about to ask.
No. But like Lord Zed's like all this like weird like bare muscle sort of thing, isn't he? With like a weird steel bikini over it, I guess.
Nice.
That's all Greek to me, I'm afraid.
To mention about the inspiration, it's not just pieces of art. Well, I guess it can be counted as pieces of art, but music videos as well. Because the director had a music video background.
Yeah.
And they come into work for the dreamscapes as well, which I thought was quite interesting, especially with, I guess, how music itself is quite a psychological thing. You know, you can hear a tune and you instantly get a feel for it, or a memory from when you first heard it. And so, like, using visuals from those music videos, I guess, it's kind of the same thing for anyone familiar with the videos. Because there's a scene, I think it's towards the end, isn't it, where she's got a crossbow? If it's not that scene, sorry, it might be just before or after, but it's, like, lifting from an REM music video that the director worked on. And I just find it quite interesting to be using music videos to inspire these dreamlike scenes when you think of how music videos don't particularly have a narrative. They mostly have, like, a theme or a visual attraction to them, don't they, more than a narrative base, so it works quite well in that aspect.
I think it's the scene with the bathtub, isn't it? That's actually the REM video.
They've said it might be.
Can't remember what song it is, but it's actually playing a bit of it in that scene. He directed that video, if I'm right.
Yeah. Whichever video it is he definitely directed the REM video. I want to say it's Losing My Religion, but I don't think it is.
That is it.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm sure that's the one.
The miniature boat was definitely a motif he used in one of his music videos as well. And admittedly, Tarson as a director is not someone I'm massively familiar with.
No, I'm not. Well, I say that. He directed Selfless a few years back, which was a Ryan Reynolds film. Not particularly great. It's one of them like body swap sci-fi crime things. It sounded like it was up my alley, but I was really disappointed with it. He directed Immortals, which you might have seen, with Henry Cavill before he was Man of Steel.
No, I don't think I've seen that. No.
I've seen his Snow White film as well, Mirror Mirror.
Right.
But Thomas is a big fan of a TV series he adapted as an adaptation of
Wizard of Oz. Yeah, Emerald City is the name of the series he directs. Every episode of it got cancelled for low viewership and too costly. Yeah,
because he weren't just doing Wizard of Oz, though, was he? He was going through the other books within the franchise by Frank Baum. He was like kind of mixing the stories together, I think, to make a little more unique spin on it, but Patriot to the source material.
Well, if it's as visual, a directorial effort as this, then that surely must be worthwhile watching.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's as visually striking as this, because obviously this, you're going back from real world to dream as Emerald City, I think. Once she entered Emerald City, or whatever world Emerald City is in, it takes a certain like more grounded approach, but still kind of dreamy in a way.
That does sound
But
good.
just a little more grounded. It's still worth checking out. I think there's 10 episodes.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
What did you guys think to the performances in this then? Because I think that is definitely one of the key strengths definitely for what D'Onofrio is bringing to the role.
He's
Yeah,
great.
definitely.
He's phenomenal. But Vince Vaughn for me is probably oddly the standout. I think he's great in this. I don't know why.
It's a performance that kind of goes unnoticed because it's not as interesting as what D'Onofrio's getting. He's getting all the larger aspects of the main focal point of the story, isn't he?
Yeah.
I'll be honest, Jennifer Lopez could do with a little more.
Yeah, she's a bit flat.
Learning that it was originally going to be Sandra Bullock, my immediate thought was that this was a role that could be played by multiple people. What Jennifer Lopez brings to it isn't
Anything.
It's not very unique
No.
for a character that plays such a central role throughout the film, especially when you get to a lot of the messianic imagery later on. Yeah, it's not a standout performance.
No. That's kind of the biggest letdown of this whole film for me, is her performance just being lacking, I guess. Because when you think of other films similar to this in field, like Prisoners, you've got Jake Gyllenhaal as the cop in that, and he kind of brings a lot of character to that role, even though he's really only got the same amount of regular procedural stuff that Jennifer Lopez is doing in this. And he's managed to create quite a three-dimensional and memorable performance that in a way is better than the film as a whole for Prisoners.
I suppose the fact that she is such a blank slate in this, towards the end, I suppose it makes it more interesting that the story can go in different directions. She might not necessarily, take the good path. And in some ways, she does kind of take an evil path to resolve the psychological struggle that Starga's having. Because, she might appear in, I think we'll talk about some of the messianic and Virgin Mary imagery later on. She might appear as the Virgin Mary, but she very quickly dons that sort of black garb and essentially becomes an assassin, crossbow-wielding assassin, which for me was it was a massive tonal shift towards the end of the film. It took me by surprise.
I think that's also part of her character's narrative, though, of getting lost within his mind, isn't it? Like, they kind of almost bind through sharing the space together.
Yeah, I also thought she did lose a bit of agency when it came to Peter having to go in there to save her, because you get that with a lot of the tableau of lots of victims. They've all got metal sort of face ornaments, essentially. Their faces have got some type of metal on them. And it's when that metal mask is put on her, she seems to lose control, essentially. It's only when Peter removes that, then she gets the freedom back. But in so doing, the fact that a man's got to go in there to rescue the woman, it doesn't make her seem as strong a female character as perhaps she could be.
Yeah, I agree with that. But that's also part of the thing where I kind of wish that Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Lopez had the other person's role within the film. I wish it was Vince Vaughn in all of her spots, if you know what I mean, and giving her the outsider with little to do but of importance, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, Vince Vaughn is great. I mean, the fact that he used to be a lawyer that's fascinating in itself. Well, it is quite
I didn't even know that, and I love Vince Vaughn.
But, I mean, there's that part where it's just like, this is a rush. We need to get this sorted out. And yet they still have that time to just sit outside, just having a bit of an exposition chat, which did make me chuckle that. But, of course, it was always good to find out more about the backstory of the characters. There were some changes made to Jennifer Lopez's character, weren't there?
Yeah, she was originally supposed to have had an abortion when she was young and at college, but apparently that didn't sit right with test audiences or test screenings when they were done. So they changed it to the brother in a car accident and being in a coma for 6 months before he dies, which I really don't think is as interesting or particularly as tragic. is what we end up with. And I think if we'd have had the original backstory for it, would have been a little more interesting for it. And I guess, yes, a little darker and more unsettling, but I think that's also the point of this film, that, darkness and the things of your past don't have to define you.
Yeah, agreed with that. There is a lot of dogs in the film, and to have your main character even more of a tragic backstory, it becomes a bit of an overload at some point, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I don't think it would be a big weight on the overall film's ending or anything. And if anything, I feel it's just something that would add to it and add to her for a performance maybe as well.
Yeah.
It's something I thought it should have been brought up earlier, though, because it's just funny how Vaughn just kind of comes out with it.
About her brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem to come into it quite late. I think that's also part of another problem with this film. It's not so much the backstory, it's the fact that her entering the dream isn't what solves the case at all. It's actually Vince Vaughn's regular gumshoe work, isn't it, that solves the case, really? I mean, yes, he goes in and sees the symbol, but if they'd have read all the records and stuff
Yes.
prior to him seeing that symbol in the dream, they could have solved the case much faster.
Yeah.
At the end, they almost cover up the psychological machine element of it and say that it was solved by old-fashioned police work, but really it was anyway. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, why couldn't the police use like an expert to trace the video feed is something that I've been thinking about.
They just didn't have the technology for that, but they had the technology to enter someone's mind.
Love that.
Yeah, I think that is part of the problem. Writers writing things before they truly understand the current technology we have. Because you get to see that in a lot of like tech thrillers, don't you? They'll do things and it's like, well, you could just ping the computer they're using to trace it.
Yeah.
But it's rare they'll ever do anything like that.
I think that's why they try and hide all that with the flashy imagery. Take your mind off it. Stop thinking about the technology they have and think about this nice little mind we've set up in it.
I mean, the crime side of the story in real time, as Starga is, hunting victims, I think it's really effective. You could draw comparisons with Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, obviously. I think it's quite a shame, really, that Starga hasn't entered popular culture in the same way that Buffalo Bill has, because he's very sinister, even down to the way that he captures the victim that they're trying to rescue throughout the entire movie, Julia Hickson, by putting a breeze block behind the car, but then faking the dog's been run over. It's just very inventive.
Yeah. What a well-trained dog that was.
I love that dog. One of my favourite dog performances in the film. He's not a patch on Jed from The Thing. That's always my favourite dog performance. But that dog, Valentine, the character of the dog called Valentine, not really an albino German Shepherd. So he was played by two dogs that were both white Malamute Husky crosses. The lead dog's real name was Bo, and the double for the dog was called Tim, but only Tim got the credit. So Tim clearly had the better...
Bo clearly wasn't ready for stardom. He wanted the quiet life.
Imagine if they'd have credited Jennifer Lopez as double and not Jennifer Lopez.
Bo was a bit of a prima donna. It's like, well, you're not working with Tim. Tim gets it.
They do say in the film, though, don't they, that albino dogs are very rare to find and come by.
Yeah, I think you can tell in real life because they're supposed to have pink noses and pink eyes. And obviously,
I was going to say that.
The one's and a black nose. So it's definitely not an albino.
And think that CGI budget they've clearly got and used. They didn't. Not one of them thought we should really tackle that.
Yeah, no one thought they'd be looking at the dog that long, I guess.
Sorry. I thought he was great, though. Both of them.
But you guys like me, though. If they say an animal in a film is albino, straight away you're looking at their eyes and noses and stuff to check if they are a real albino or if they've just decided they can get away with dyeing them or something.
Is this a favourite subgenre of yours that we're not aware of?
It's just something I do whenever something comes up about being an albino. It's just like, oh, I'll check that out. No, that's not. Why are you saying it is when it's not?
But it is interesting the way they bring the dog in, and that's the part where there is definitely a psychological decline for Starga. So, yeah, maybe, not the most positive animal to bring in. Jennifer Lopez ends up adopting him at the end.
He was a nice dog.
Oh, he's a lovely dog, but he also almost killed Jennifer Lopez, essentially.
Every dog has its day.
That dog is abandoned in that room for a long time, and there is no water, no food, so...
Well behaved, wasn't it?
Oh, very well behaved. We're going to talk about all the artwork, because that's definitely the strongest part of the film for me.
I know you're very interested in, so yeah, handle.
Well, I don't actually know what the first one that pops in is. Obviously, the key one that everyone will remember is the references to Damien Hirst. So obviously, he was famous for having animal remains preserved in formaldehyde and dissected. And in the film, this is specifically referencing the installation that was titled Some Comfort Gained from the Acceptance of the Inherent Lies in Everything. that was created with 2 cows that were separated into 12 display cases. And I actually did go back and count in the film, and there are 12 sections of the film. So, thanks guys for making me count segments of horse for your podcast.
You didn't have to.
That was on your own doing.
You didn't have to go and recreate it either.
Oh no, better return to the abattoir now. Well, yeah, obviously we mentioned Giger before, who is one of my favourite artists. When Catherine first chases the childlike representation of Starga, you see the stone corridors and there are steps, and they're very reminiscent of his painting that was called Shacked. A more tenuous one is a painting he did called Lilith. Well, it was a series of paintings, and they were in tribute to his late partner. And you can kind of see a similarity with the horns when Starga's got, the white face and his a demonic sort of appearance. But one that's remarkably close is when Catherine escapes. There's a cube that she's trapped in the film that she then falls out of and floats to the ground. And that's, if you look in the background, what is essentially a giant corridor. That's remarkably like the pre-production artwork that was that Giger produced for the corridors of the derelict spacecraft for Alien. And it's incredibly similar to that. Other than that, there's Odd Nerdrum. So there's an image of 3 figures in a field when Peter goes in after Catherine. And that's an homage to the 1989 painting titled Dawn by, Odd Nerdrum was a Norwegian figurative painter. Although in this instance, the image is actually reversed. But it's just a clear reference to that piece of art. And yeah, that surrealist imagery, it's just nice to spot those references. I suppose you could criticize it and say that it's just, at what point is it homage and at what point is it just copy-paste? Is there any real connection between those artistic images and Starga? Because for me, it would have made sense that when the police were investigating Starga's abode or his, his lair, essentially, if you were to see those pieces of art, that they were pieces of art that meant something to him. But other than the sort of the intestine rack, which obviously plays a very key part of the film, especially as far as Peter's concerned. Yeah, that was just missing for me, that connective tissue, because essentially he's just a mechanic, isn't he? He's somehow got access to all of this technology, and but where's he getting these finances from? Because this,
Please say it up, Matt.
Wow. Oh, to live in 2000s California, that's the dream. But, I'm really nitpicking. I mean, like I say, the visuals are such a strong element of this film that I'm happy to overlook those sort of plot inconsistencies just for the sake of something that looks really good, frankly.
I think they just looked a lot about where they thought this is quite dark and twisted sort of thing, and how he twists it into his own pleasures.
Yeah, well, because it's a very fetishistic film and, masochistic. And you see that with the tableaus of all of his victims in cells. And that ties in with a lot of the music video imagery that you were talking about before. The premise alone is quite similar to Saw in some ways, that there's, a victim in a trap. And especially the dream sequence with all of the victims, the grimy gears and the, planking chains. It's almost gothic, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. As for the artwork referencing, I don't know if it's so much as copying the pictures as it is so much of trying to get that same sort of dreamlike tone. There'll be something that they can share on set when they're making the designs and so on, isn't it? Like a visual touchstone, so they can share the thoughts easy. It's like, if you've seen this painting, we want something like this with a hint of that, makes it a lot easier to discuss. As for his money, I can only assume, like the way he kills people, he does some very creative accounting.
Maybe he takes their wallet.
It's a lot of wallets.
I don't know how many victims he had. How many victims did he have?
I can't remember, actually. No, I don't know.
Another reason to watch it again.
Absolutely.
You can go watch it and count that now.
Did you? Damn it! I counted bits of horse. I should have been counting people.
Yeah, all the ones he has in cells, I'm guessing.
Did you spot Peter Sarsgaard, by the way, in an uncredited appearance?
Yeah. I remember Brian pointing him out.
Yeah,
he got really excited, and then that was it.
Yeah, fairly in the film.
He has films where he's like that, where he's not always a big part, and then there'll be other parts where he's pretty much a lead. Quite an interesting act, to be honest, when you start looking through his work, 'cause he's done loads of different stuff. But a lot of his films, it's probably just my taste in film anyway, because it seems to be quite dark in certain nature. He's the dad in, I can't remember the name of the film now.
Orphan.
Yes, Orphan. He's in Flight Plan.
That's great.
Particularly dark. It is, I haven't seen that in a while. Jodie Foster, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've seen him play a secret twist villain in a few things, that's for sure. He's got that ability to just go from, charming to slightly sinister, which is,
Yeah, he's very good in, we've covered it already, Garden State.
Yeah.
Are you surprised how many films you've seen from this writer?
Yeah.
This film?
I was actually, yeah.
Mark Prottersby, is it?
Yeah, something like that.
Have you seen any of his films before, Matt?
Not off the top of my head.
Because did he disown this film?
Yeah, he disowned this film. He said he hopes they remake it.
Well, lucky for him, there's a 2009 sequel, which sounds quite similar.
I can't believe I only learned of that sequel while looking this up again.
Yeah, I just find it odd that he disowned this and said it's barely anything like, when he doesn't seem to have much focus on original works anyway, because he worked on the Old Boy remake in 2013, which the Korean one is based on a manga. He worked on I Am Legend, which is based on a novel, and I guess kind of a remake of a Mega Man, which was based on the same novel. He worked on a Poseidon remake in 2006, and I think he only does story on it, but Thor for the MCU.
Yeah.
And he does have a TV show currently on Apple Plus called Sugar, which is a detective thing with Colin Farrell. And I believe that's just recently been renewed for a season 2. And I don't know if that's based on anything or not.
He created that.
Did he?
Yeah.
Right.
For films he's written, I've only seen I Am Legend. I've seen the original, The Poseidon Adventure, but not the remake.
Yeah, I've seen the original.
Yeah.
I've seen neither.
I thought you'd have seen the remake, though, because is it not Kurt Russell?
Genuinely?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, I think he's got, oh my God, I'm blanking his name. He was like Sluther.
Gene Hackman.
Yeah, I think he's got Gene Hackman's role.
Right, I'll have to have a weird Poseidon Adventure binge. So what did you guys think to all the religious imagery in The Cell?
I love it.
Genuinely.
I'm not keen on the Virgin Mary thing.
Yeah,
I do understand. She's supposed to be like all good and whatnot, but no, that one don't really. That's probably like one of the only things that really didn't work for me.
Yeah, I did think that was incredibly unsubtle. I thought the fact that when she woke up, she had the Shroud of Turin on her face, that was a bit more subtle at least. Although quite funny that that's been debunked as a hoax, which I shouldn't get into as an atheist. But anyway, that descent from that messianic figure to a crossbow-wielding killer was a bit too stark a contrast, I thought. And that weird thing with the Christmas card decorations around the border was...
Still trying to wrap my head around that one.
You know the image at the start, because they do show an image of the Virgin Mary, don't they? Was it on a Christmas card? Is it from that?
Oh, it could be.
It was a strange directorial choice, that I thought.
A little distracting from what's happening on scene as well.
Yeah.
I just couldn't take it seriously, just having the Virgin J-Lo in a desert beckoning to children was just like, right. Okay.
There was 2 costume designers on this film. There's Ishioka that I mentioned already, but she mostly focused on the dreamscape outfits and the more surreal looking things. Jennifer Lopez told her that she wanted costumes she could be comfortable in, but Ishioka said, no, you need costumes here that you shouldn't be comfortable in because it's not your mind, which I quite liked. And then the other costume designer was April Napier, who's done more recent work on some dramas like Lady Bird and May December from last year or early this year. I'm not sure on the date on that now. She got the mundane outfits, I guess. But I think that's quite a hard job anyway, to find an outfit to look natural to an actor and also fit the film anyway. And it's quite a thankless job.
Absolutely.
But no, I just like the fact that Ishioka had told Jennifer Lopez that she should be wearing costumes that aren't comfortable, which makes sense, I guess, for the approach. But I don't think it helped her performance at all.
Maybe that's why she was so wooden.
Yeah, maybe.
Because she's so deliberately neutral, that's why she can get in and use the system so well.
Yeah.
I mean, I could buy it, yeah. But it's definitely the psychological element that sort of sets this apart, because you can imagine loads of films from, well, obviously Silence of the Lambs is the obvious one, Red Dragon, all of those films, you could all give them the subtitle, Step into the Mind of a Serial Killer.
Yeah.
Whereas this time they literally do. So that's quite a unique selling point, which I quite like, and the way that it sort of examines the killer's perception of his victims. So you get the way he sees his victims as dolls, and how that sort of ties to his real world, how he's got those dolls that he's chopped their heads off and replaced them with bird skulls, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You've got the psychosexual element, which is clearly on display in his display cabinets, in his mind. That sort of fetishistic view of women and femininity, which has been distorted by child abuse, which is where, in a way, the film almost gets its messages mixed up, because you start to feel empathy for him, that you've got the two sides. You've got the childlike innocent side, which obviously Catherine is trying to nurture and protect and save, versus that grandiose where, he sees himself as a demon king, he sees himself as a pope with that flowing cape that comes from a throne. So you've got that interesting, switch. And maybe it is a bit challenging for an audience to think, oh, I feel sorry for this guy. And then you think, oh, God, no, he's just been dipping women in bleach and recreating the start of Twin Peaks.
David Lynch is one of the other inspirations for this, because there was this in Blue Velvet. He recreates or references heavily a scene from Blue Velvet from David Lynch. But the idea of these two thoughts that you've kind of got to hold for him while you watch the film, this more innocent side and then this monstrous side, I guess that kind of reflects humanity anyway, because people themselves are quite messy and contradictory of their own thoughts, aren't they, in a way?
Yeah, agreed. Well, that's what I like. It just makes it interesting. It's also interesting that physically he's no longer a threat. Other than the woman who is obviously in the cell, you know, the tank that's slowly going to be filling with water, there's the threat that we need to rescue this woman, you know, from the police. That's their target. But at the point that they catch him, he's completely been neutralized. He's had that seizure. He's comatose. He's got this Wayland syndrome, hasn't he? Which is, it is a fictional syndrome.
Yeah, Wayland's infraction.
Wayland's infraction, thank you. But yeah, essentially, it's over, you know, that he's not going to be doing any more killing. And then, because of this technology, they essentially feed him a new victim psychologically, which, you know, I quite like, in order to try and rescue the woman who is currently imprisoned, who they're trying to track down. It's almost sacrificial in a way, were Peter not to go in there and rescue her.
Yeah. And I guess that plays into the title of the film, because there's the woman in the cell that he's got, but they've essentially turned him into a cell as well, I guess, when they go in.
Yeah.
Even the title's metaphorical, isn't it? So yeah, I like that sort of thing. I think it's quite fun. For a film that is incredibly dark.
I have more fun watching the darker stuff than a regular film. I would get more fun from watching Silence of the Lambs than I would, I don't know, Cars.
That is a double bill.
I'd love to see that. It's a double bill.
Lightning McQueen meets Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
Is there anything more you guys have on this that you'd like to say?
I think I'm happy.
I've kind of done it again, because Howard Shaw, he does the music on this. He's famous for Lord of the Rings, but he did what I guess is the reason they got him, which is Silence of the Lambs. And he did Seven as well. So that's a good reason to get him on the film like this. He's a great composer, isn't he?
Absolutely. You get that nice contrast as well, because he's doing his side of the score with the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and then you've got Bashir Attar and the Masters Musicians of Jujuka. So you've got that more, the orchestral music from Howard, and then from Bashir, you've got that more traditional music. So the score for this, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very just full of character.
Yeah.
To say that they're filmed in Namibia, but to say most of it's shot in California, it feels very exotic. This film, it's quite expansive in scope.
Oh, yeah.
I think that goes from the use of colour and imagery, because it uses colour quite well, this film. It even tries to make you more pastels pop, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, that was another thing. I don't own this film, so I ended up renting this from Amazon. And it ended up being a 35mm print that was scanned. It still had the cigarette burns in the corners. I like that tangibility. So it just surprised me for a film from 2000 with, some big stars with Jennifer Lopez, Vince Vaughn, Vincent D'Onofrio, that there wasn't, a high resolution version of the film that had been nicely cleaned up. But I enjoyed it all the more for that, because it just felt even more gritty and real.
Yeah.
The visuals are very good. It being 2000 and it's early days for computer-generated imagery on the scale that this film demands as well. But there's a nice mixture of practical, with real physical sets, real costumes, and the CG sets. As I mentioned, the cape that Starga is wearing when he descends from his throne. And that's the real cape attached to his back. But if you look at the screen, the set, which obviously isn't all practical, part of it's digital. The cape that then wraps around the room, which is obviously at a huge scale, you couldn't really do it practically. So it transitions from a practical cape from his back to a digital cape wrapping around the room. Spawn was famous for that cape-wise, wasn't it, CG-wise?
Yeah.
But it's just an interesting time for visuals, and I'll always maintain that early 2000s CGI, even though you could criticise them, they might not be the most well-realised, but they still have a character to them. I don't know, maybe it's just the time we were growing up watching films. But that early 2000s CG, I get a kick out of that.
Yeah, I think part of their look, though, comes from they knew their limits, and they definitely weren't as overworked then as they are now, which definitely helps. And this film in particular, I think, is it 7 visual effects companies that had working?
Quite a lot.
There are a lot, yeah.
It definitely helps, I guess, having more companies on it, because you can split the scenes up a bit better, and probably one getting a better look or different textures even, because I know some companies will be better at like a more liquid effect, and then others would be better again a more texturized effect. So depending what you want, you'd go for a different company anyway. The fact they've got 7 visual effects companies working on it, I assume it was quite well researched and discussed in the design idea of the film, for what company is going to be required for what.
That's where using already known pieces of famous modern art, it makes sense to use them as visual reference points, doesn't it? Because you can just make that is the dream we're going for, rather than come up with entirely original things. So it makes sense. But to say they had so many effects company, I think it all blends together really seamlessly.
Yeah,
they had K&B doing the practical work as well, and they do wonderful practical effects. K&B.
Any examples?
off the top of my head. They've definitely done a lot of work for Halloween. Noel Nicotero, and I should know, but Greg Nicotero you'll know from lots of work. You've got Walking Dead.
Is he the guy that worked on the Bicycle Girl, I think she was called, in the pilot episode of The Walking Dead? It was like the half corpse that crawled.
It would be him, yeah. They did a lot of work for Evil Dead 2 for sure. A lot of the times he gets killed in the things he's in, not in this instance.
That's lucky then, isn't it?
Are we ready to move on? Or
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it was Kurtzman, Nicotero and Berger. I'm there now.
I mean, this film definitely stands out, and I think it still holds up really well. Even down to that early 2000 effects, they don't really let it down. I guess it just plays into that surrealism of the dreams, doesn't it? Because they're not really using the effect work much in the real world of the film, are they?
No.
But if you chaps have nothing more to say, we can jump on to my choice.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's now 2003 with Darkness Falls.
You stay in the light, you stay alive. Just walk towards my voice.
Created on a budget of 11 million and grossing $47,488,536 worldwide. Directed by Jonathan Liebsman, story and screenplay by Joe Harris, and then additional screenwriters with John Fasano and James Vanderbilt. It stars Janie Clay as Kyle, Emma Caulfield as she was then as Caitlin. I think that she's now at Emma Caulfield board now. Lee Cormier as Michael, Grant Pyro as Larry, Sullivan Stapleton as Matt, Steve Mazaukis is that as Dr. Murphy. And the synopsis, as IMDb reads, is: a vengeful spirit has taken the form of the Tooth Fairy to exact vengeance on the town that lynched her 150 years earlier. Her only opposition is the only child, now grown up, who has survived her before. I know this isn't a particularly fascinating film to watch. I feel it's quite atmospheric and plays well with many horror tropes that we recognise now still. But the behind-the-scenes stuff, as I know you guys, especially Matt, is very interested with this one.
I think this film is very fascinating, entirely from the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah. So I'll let you two kick us off with the discussion on this then, I guess.
Do you want to go for it first, Thomas?
Might as well. I just want to say that I do actually love this film as a film as well. I come across this through Joe Harris, a comic book writer. He wrote a comic book series called Slingers, which is a Spider-Man film. I read all that and thought, that's great. And I looked him up and I was like, he does this movie. So I watched this movie and I thought, this movie's great. And then I learned all the behind-the-scenes stuff, where the film is just like a complete mess, and it's surprising how it got made at all to the quality it is. Because there's like plot points that are just taken out. It's bizarre. Because I know the novelisation of this was written by Keith R.A. DeCandido, and he kept it to mostly the original script. So there's like hints that Kyle, the main guy, he could have been the killer in the story. So there's like hints towards that, and like all this other stuff kept in as well. And it's actually like a 75-minute movie, really, when you look at it. It had the 11 minutes credits that they had to make it feature length. They just took out so much from this film, and just like I said, it's just shocking. But yeah, I do love it.
I can see why. It's a very atmospheric film. That opening as well, I really like the opening, sort of explaining the history of Matilda Dixon, who is, the villainous presence in this film. Not really a tooth fairy at all in reality, which probably explains why one of the titles, The Tooth Fairy, was thrown out. But just watching it because this was a first time watch for me. I'd never seen this film before. And even though I wasn't familiar with it at all, you could just tell that things weren't quite right. They weren't quite married up properly. And then just reading into the behind the scenes, it just became endlessly more fascinating for me. And how this thing even got made, and how poor Jonathan Liebsman, wasn't just completely distraught and left the film business entirely after just making this film. You're a lot more familiar with him than I, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't say a lot more, but more so, maybe, yeah.
Just with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles connection.
Yeah.
Which even I was happy to see them in the bathroom, the figures around. And there's even a Spider-Man figurine in the scene, which was a bit of a nod and a wink to Columbia Pictures. Because I think it's no secret that he took this project on, Liebsman, to try and ingratiate himself with the studio so we could have more creative freedom. And wow, he definitely surrendered a lot of creative freedom with this one.
Yeah. It's odd, though, that the Spider-Man figure's there because James Vanderbilt went on to write, or at least co-write, the Amazing Spider-Man films 1 and 2, which stars Andrew Garfield. That's a fun little coincidence, I think.
Because it is a continuity error, because it is the figure is specifically Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man figure, apparently. I mean, the opening scene I thought was very atmospheric, and it's quite interesting to know how that changed, because initially that was all supposed to be shadow work. You weren't supposed to see Matilda Dixon at that part of the film at all. But, you get that nice subversion of expectations. The mother goes into the room to check the room out, and it's usually a case of the adult saying, yeah, there's nothing there, then leaving, and then he gets the kid. But in this case, yeah, there's nothing there, but then he does get the mum. And that sort of sets in motion the rules, which seem quite flexible, as we'll find out later, won't we? Because the rules that Matilda follows are a bit scattershot, I'd say. And that's probably down to the amount of drafts that this thing went through. And the fact that there was a 9-month production break definitely didn't help. As you can definitely see, because of the boy who's playing young Kyle in this scene, there's a scene where he's kneeled down. And that's because the 9-month production break, he'd grown in between the shooting days. But yeah, you've got Emily Browning at the start as young Caitlin introduced. And well, for me, she was obviously familiar from Ghost Ship. I think there's another film that you guys know her from.
Yeah, Sucker Punch from Zack Snyder. That gets panned as well.
Yeah, I love that film. I love films that get panned.
Yeah, Emily has a very strange line in that, because her and Carl, as children at the time, share a kiss, and then she says the first time shouldn't taste like blood because he's lost his tooth at this stage. And that is a very strange line, which then was originally supposed to come back at the end of the film in an unused ending. But yeah, you get that absolutely wonderful shot, which for me was the highlight of the movie, where you get Kyle, his mother's been killed, and he's cowering in the lit bathroom, which is just this really brilliant white. You've got the way that it's framed, the shower curtain just splits his face perfectly in half as the camera sort of rolls out of the bathroom to reveal the dark hall, and then Matilda just perched above the door, ready to pounce if Kyle were to step out into the darkness. And it's such a wonderful atmospheric shot. Even though that whole sequence, you weren't supposed to see her at all, I think just having her visible, it was worth it just for that one shot, which for me is just, that's the highlight of the movie. Which maybe is a bit harsh to say, seeing as it's very early on.
It's kind of a ticking bomb approach, though, isn't it? Adding the tension.
Yeah, but by showing her, by saying this is what they're facing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose there is another reveal later on, so it's not like they are showing everything at the same time.
No.
She's wearing a mask, of course.
Yeah. I personally would have liked to have seen the original take, because as you said, it changed. I mean, there were 5 titles before they settled on this. As you mentioned, there was The Tooth Fairy, but there was Don't Peek, which I think is quite a good one. It's got sort of an old-time feel sound to it, I think. And then there's Fear of the Dark, The Tooth Fairy, The Ghost of Matilda Dixon, which is too long a title. And then there's The Tooth Fairy, Every Legend Has Its Terrible Dark Side, which I kind of think would have been a little better the other way around. Every Legend Has Its Terrible Dark Side, on The Tooth Fairy. And then you could do a series of other legends with dark spins in that way.
Could have called it The Tooth Fairy. Every legend has a terrible subtitle.
Or The Tooth Fairy, or is it?
We've got to talk about the creature design, because even though I do like the creature design that was used for Matilda, when you know what was actually supposed to be used, which was heavily Guillermo del Toro inspired, even down to having Doug Jones in the suit, and that design is incredible.
Yeah, that was by Steve Wang. And yeah, the suit is amazing. It's got them sort of bat-like wings and just lots of teeth inside the design. Organic to the creature, I'm guessing. But just, yeah, really cool. And Todd McFarlane.
Look at that through the, not just behind the scenes stuff, but yeah, you were just about to say Todd McFarlane Toys did the...
Yeah, they did a figure, I think, a year before the film came out.
Yeah. So I bet that was disappointing for them people who thought, oh, what a great looking creature. I can't wait to see it in the film. And then, boom.
Yeah.
McFarlane Toys did some really great work in their time. Have you ever seen the Blair Witch toys they did? They did a male and female version of the Blair Witch, which is obviously, it ties back to nothing, really. It's entirely original, but it's just a fascinating what if. Learning about this and the fact that they'd gone and produced the toy for the original design, it just reminded me of that. I thought, just a fascinating point in time where they were giving toy companies access and sort of spoilers for things that then didn't end up being spoilers anyway.
Well, the spoilers is kind of still a thing now, because there's big toy fairs similar to Comic Cons, and there's been many Marvel characters, or even the designs of them, being announced via these toy fairs or conventions for toys before the films actually had an official announcement of the character being in it, or their look has been shared.
Lego
is still happening.
Lego did.
Yeah. But the new design was by Stan Winston. And I think it's a little letdown for the guy, because it's Stan Winston as an who did Terminator.
So much. I mean, Jurassic Park, Aliens.
Yeah.
But Terminator is obviously quite a big one. Predator.
Terminator was still James Cameron's design that they've settled on, wasn't it, really? For the T-800 anyway. But for the stuff that Stan Winston's worked on, and then the Tooth Fairy we get, well, I guess it's because it's not a Tooth Fairy anymore, is it? When he's coming on, it's Matilda Dixon. So that would change the approach of the design, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And I don't know when that was changed, because in early scripts, apparently the creature was only going to be seen in the final act, and the studio didn't like that. And apparently that's when they brought Stan Winston in. So I'm not too sure about the old order of events of when things changed. Or I certainly don't particularly know why so many things were changed. It feels like somebody had a good idea they liked originally, and then they're like, oh, we don't like how it's looking now, it's starting filming, and they're trying to tinker with it and turn it into something it wasn't.
Yeah.
The studios were reacting to the evolving horror landscape at the time. So you've got obviously the rise of J-horror at a similar time, which is why for one of the posters, it might be the cover of the VHS, it said Darkness Falls runs rings round the ring. It doesn't. It didn't. It was a bold claim. But at the same time, I told you there was that 9-month break in production. And, well, for various reasons, this film went into production before Jeepers Creepers did, but Jeepers Creepers was released first. And that's why you get the studios thinking, oh, but Jeepers Creepers was showing the foe, so we need to show the foe early this time. So that actively changed that. The production team weren't happy with what Jeepers Creepers did on a few levels, and one of them was the police station attack later in the film, which is one of the highlights of the film for sure.
Yeah.
But is obvious when you say police station attack. Definitely for me, because I hadn't seen Darkness Falls before. I have seen Jeepers Creepers before. As soon as you say police station attack, I think of Jeepers Creepers. And Malignant now as well has obviously done it. But they weren't happy at all that Jeepers Creepers beat them to the punch, essentially, with that scene in particular.
That's understandable as well, isn't it? Because it must be horrible to have what is quite a new idea in such a genre where there's so much of the same. To have a new idea that you can do, and then somebody beat you to it because production's delayed or whatnot, must be quite a horrible feeling coming from the creative side of that. Because even though your idea is first, it's not the idea that's seen first.
It's a great way to just immediately raise the stakes, is just wiping out the police force. And directly wiping out the police force, that the villain is going straight for them, wiping them all out, moving on. And even has the intelligence to direct their fire to destroy the lights as well. As a villain, I really like Matilda Dixon. I think she's quite an interesting horror villain, and I'm surprised that they didn't sort of pounce upon this as a franchise. That this could have gone places, I think.
Yeah, it made its money back, more than its money back, really.
Made it to #1, which shocked me.
Yeah, my question would be though, is if you're going to capitalize on a sequel with this, what would it be? Where would you go with it though?
Well, for starters, you need to explain the rules, don't you? Because there's a lot in this film that the various drafts cause issues. How she's moving is a big thing. So what is essentially, it is an MRI machine. They say it's a sensory deprivation tank in the final cut of the movie. You see it and you say, well, that is an MRI machine. They leave the scene in where they inject gadolinium into, is it Michael, the young boy?
Yeah.
Which is another issue, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, they've even got the scene of them injecting gadolinium, which is a contrast agent so that you can see blood vessels, potential issues with organs, tumours, that sort of thing, which makes no sense if this is a sensory deprivation chamber for this child to be facing his fear. The way that it's shot as well with the sound design, and I do like the sound design in this, that growl, Matilda's growl, which apparently that they're real cries from real elderly people in distress that were recorded, which is a little bit sinister.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can enjoy that next time you're watching this fun film.
I will, thank you.
But it sounds like she's in the tank waiting for him, the way that the scene is set up. So if it is true, sort of presumably whilst the lights are switched off, Matilda was thinking, aha, he's going in the sensory deprivation tank. I'm just going to hide in there and wait for him. And you get a scene later on when Kyle is locked inside a prison cell and he just seems perfectly safe while she's zipping around the room. Really, she needs to be going for him. That's her target. So why she's wasting her time just showing herself to all these police officers so she can murder them? She's just a psychopath, really, isn't she? She just wants to kill people.
Don't we all?
And I think some of this comes from the rewrites, though, because the original design, she was supposed to be the angel of death.
Yeah.
So for me, it was the dark that she could travel through like a portal. Once there's an absence of light, she can travel through to that place now.
See, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think it also plays on the horrors that children have, because children are just afraid of the dark sometimes with no real logic to it, but for some reason they'll think there's something there, but you turn the light on, oh, it's gone all of a sudden, and it's kind of plays with that sort of childlike rule of fear, which is something you would expect for a fear-based thing that's come from his childhood as well.
Yeah.
But no, they definitely do play a little fast and loose with the rules with her, and I think that's more from the changing of rewrites and a lack of an overall direction with the story because it's changing through rewrites.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that was down to it being a directorial debut and how, how much control he's had over the project, but also was willing to exert on the project and how pushed around he was. But some of the changes are really bizarre. Like early on, you can see in Kyle's bedroom on the wall, there are flags that say Point Ferry, which was initially going to be the name of the town. It wasn't called Darkness Falls. And if you think about it, it's a really stupid title for a place that has a lighthouse and no waterfall. It's Point because there's a point with a lighthouse on it. It's Ferry because, there's a body of water sitting next to it.
Maybe it's an ironic name.
Yeah?
Yeah, like when poor people get the nickname of Tiny.
Oh no. The darkness will never fall here. Oh no, we've had a power cut across the entire town. Which I love because it just makes, instead of just cutting the power, it just makes all of the bulbs flash. And I really love the fact that Maglites, who make torches for us in England, flashlights if you're in the States, they ended up getting in touch with the production crew and saying, excuse me, you made our lights look rubbish. But also, it never even establishes if Matilda is the one that cuts the power.
Are you saying there's someone working for her?
There's a cult of Matilda. It's gone the Halloween cult of Thorn route, do you think?
Yeah.
Well, Michael did attack a police station, of course, so yeah. I do like, although if you think about it, it also is questionable, is the fact that Kyle, upon escaping the town, presumably in daylight because Matilda doesn't get him, goes to Vegas. Also begs the question, what was Matilda doing whilst Kyle was in a sanitarium? You just decide to have a few years off?
Hitting the one-armed bandits in the casino.
Yeah.
Right, of course. But I do love that Kyle has gone to Vegas because it's the city that never sleeps. Lights are on at all times, so he's always protected. I think that's just a really nice idea. But that also brings into question, what is the range of this, entity? Because you get the scene with Larry, when Larry's driving him out of Darkness Falls. Just when they're about to leave is when she pounces, which to me, and I might be wrong, admittedly, it almost seemed like this is the border, this is the limit of her power. So she got them just before they escaped. But, it doesn't take the time to explain that, which is probably, a consequence of all the rewrites. That scene in particular, at that stage, Kyle has stolen a gun from a store where he's buying lots of flashlights. And for that scene, Matilda was supposed to be attacking the car, and Kyle was supposed to be shooting through the roof of the car, and the bullets were going to have no effect. He was going to use a flashlight to, ward her off, and that was, this is how we fight her. Although at that point, Kyle should be aware of it, because in the version of the script that is mostly what was filmed, he's very aware of, the tooth fairy, in inverted commas, and how you combat her with light. So it just makes no sense at all, really.
No. I mean, I've got nothing to say to that.
But Larry, his lawyer, in a previous version of the script, he was supposed to be his cousin. There was supposed to be an introduction of Larry early on as a child in a classroom scene, which also had Angus Sampson's character, Ray. Ray and Kyle, they have a fight in the bar, and Ray is incredibly violent to Kyle. That's because in an unfilmed sequence, or a sequence that wasn't left in the film, because the director says, when he received a lot of the criticism, he basically said, well, but the studio told us to take that out. We filmed it all. We explained it all, but the studio just demanded we remove it. And so there were scenes that explained why Ray was so aggressive to Kyle, and they're just lost. And there's even a scene with Ray's wife in the background crying, and it's just not addressed. There's just a random woman in the police station just crying. And similarly, the film was also supposed to be R-rated before it was downgraded to PG-13 in the States. So Matilda was supposed to be taking body parts. So Ray was supposed to have his jaw ripped off. And instead you see a crime scene photo where there are these very digital-looking scratches on Ray's face. And I'm assuming they've also digitally put the jaw back in just to try and, make it a less violent film.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the novelization apparently has some of them scenes in it. So maybe you want to track one of them novels down and read that.
I need to try and forgive Keith R.A.D. Candido because of the Alien Isolation novel, which I wasn't a big fan of. So maybe this will improve my opinion of it.
Well, I like what I've read from him because he does a couple of supernatural novels and I really enjoyed them. Actually, I think he does 3 and they're all pretty good. Yeah.
It'll be worth checking out then. Right, it sounds like I'm really picking on this film. But to know about all these crazy decisions that have been made, I find it more exciting and more interesting. It's a fun film. It's got a real sense of that there's a wit to the dialogue. Some of the things that Larry is saying is just hilarious, frankly. It's that sort of post-Scream era where the characters are almost aware that they're in a horror movie.
Yeah.
Like, he calls out, why are we splitting up?
I actually have a quote, and I think this is Larry as well. Maybe misquoted, but it's about having a bad day. And he says something like, I'm having a bad day. I've had a dead body fall on me. But to mention Scream, that's pretty good because James Vanderbilt's the writer on this, and he wrote the last 2 Scream films anyway, or co-wrote the last 2 Scream films.
Yeah.
I mean, even the other writer on this, Joe Fasano, he's got comedy background because he wrote Another 48 Hours, is the one that I wrote down because that's like one of my favourite buddy cop movies from Walter Hill. I'm a big fan of them 2 48-hour films. Well, I think the first 48 Hours was Eddie Murphy's like first acting lead. So without that, you wouldn't even have Beverly Hills Cop, which I think is inferior to the first 48 Hours anyway. Although it's still a great film now.
Yeah, it's still good fun.
But it's definitely an odd film. From characters, is Larry the guy? He's in Insidious. He's with specs.
No,
That's Ray. That's Angus Sampson.
That's Ray.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Who gives away, of course, that the film was shot in Australia because he's the only one using his native Australian accent. The others are covering it generally quite well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he is the giveaway of where the film was shot.
As we're on about actors, what do you think about the lead, Chaney Clay, who plays Kyle?
I think he puts in a solid performance. Probably one of the highlights in the cast, to be honest.
I think he's great.
Yeah, I do, because he's got a bit of a tragic story anyway, hasn't he? He died in his sleep, and his dad says it was a sleep apnea, but apparently it was a drug overdose. I genuinely find him a really great lead actor, and he's got something that reminds me of Andrew Garfield in his appearance anyway. I thought he was a great actor. He was something I liked in it when I first watched it. It turns out I'd watched this years before Thomas even watched it.
Right.
I probably watched this about 16 years ago-ish, and just kind of forgot about it. And it was only when Thomas brought it up after that Spider-Man comic spin-off thing, and he was on about watching it again. It was only while I was watching it I'd realised I'd seen it before.
What's really interesting about his performance here is you actually get to see 2 separate performances because there are certain scenes in the film that were shot whilst he was playing his version of the character from a different script where he might be the killer. Yeah. So there's a scene when he's in Vegas on the phone to Caitlin, and he's very dismissive of, Michael saying that, what of Michael's troubles, where he's going for exactly the same thing. He knows, that it's the Tooth Fairy. He knows what the threat is. He shouldn't be being dismissive of Michael at this point because he knows that this kid's in danger. So that, of course, would have tied into the version of the script where, is this guy really the killer and it's all a delusion? Although in that version, or in one of the versions of the script, that would then be disproved when Matilda attacks the car. That was the part where you first see her and you realise that, no, this isn't delusional. It is a physical thing that's attacking multiple people at the same time. Because there are parts in the film where she attacks and he's the only survivor. So when he's there with his mum, she attacks, he's the only survivor. When he's there with Ray, she attacks, he's the only survivor again. So that's tying into the murder mystery side of things.
Yeah, it would also tie into the version where it could only kill in sequence.
Yes, which is very interesting.
I know you know more about that, so I'll let you say about that as well, I guess.
Before I move on, he's also got some really good sort of comedic chops to him as well, because there's the part where one of the police officers is just saying, are you going to go and talk to your lawyer about this? And he says, that's going to be kind of tough since my lawyer's in a couple of pieces on Pontus Avenue. Very deadpan, I love it.
Yeah.
But that ending, the whole sequence in the hospital, which is a lot of fun, they're jumping from shadows to shadows. Yeah. It almost looks like Matilda is just playing with her food at this point. It's almost like, it doesn't matter. He's seen me, I'll just kill him first. But even though she's got a couple of targets here, but she almost doesn't mind going for them last, which is kind of nice from a plot convenience standpoint. There are a few other weird quirks, like there was a jump scare earlier in the film where a cat jumps on top of the car. It's just one of those, here you go, another jump scare moments. But in a deleted scene, one of the nurses was actually caring for lots of feral cats, and Matilda was going to have killed this nurse. So they were just going to find her corpse, and then all these feral cats were just going to be feeding off the corpse. Presumably that was a bit too graphic, so that didn't make the cut. Matilda gets her mask shot in the police station attack, so that's when you learn that there is... Well, we already know that she's a burn victim, but you get the first glimpse of those burns underneath the mask. And then we get the end of the movie with the lighthouse. And I know this reminded you of Alan Wake a lot too.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, which is a game I absolutely love. But yeah, you get that wonderful shot of her floating outside the lighthouse, which is another one of the, the shots of the film that really stuck with me. I think that's just a really great shot, really atmospheric. And then we get it's maybe a strange way to end a film where the lead is literally doing a flame punch with to take her out because a kerosene lantern is damaged and the kerosene's on his arm. So yeah, he punches her with a flaming arm. So in the original, badass. I mean, it is. But yeah, so in the original version, there was the idea behind Matilda was that you had to look at her for her to be able to kill you. So she was supposed to be killing her victims in order, that people had looked at her. So there was like a bittersweet ending where, because you get the scene where the exposed lamp of the lighthouse is obviously rotating. And once Matilda's vanquished, Caitlin and Carl were going to embrace, and there was going to be, a romantic kiss, but it was going to be bittersweet because she was going to ask, is it over? And he was going to say, yes, I know it's over because I'm blind now, because the lamp of the lighthouse would have blinded him. And because he cannot see, Matilda cannot kill him, and therefore she cannot kill anybody else further down the chain. So that is evil vanquished permanently because of his sacrifice, essentially the sacrifice of his sight. And that would also have tied into, it shouldn't taste of blood the first time. That really strange line was then going to come back at the end of the movie with Caitlin and Kyle.
I would have much rather have seen that end, I'll be honest, as well. I mean, I enjoyed this film as it is, but everything else that it's not that you read about what it should have been just sounds more interesting.
There are a ton of plot holes. I mean, the fact that the town are very ignorant of this creature that is just massacring children indiscriminately, presumably. But the scenes were shot that explained all of that they were almost sort of living in denial or just sort of accepting that, some of their kids weren't going to make it. And even some of these changes, even down to Michael's relationship to Caitlin, because at one stage he was supposed to be her son, becomes a brother, but then you question, where are the parents? And then at the end of the movie, you can spot the mother who's, where the hell's she been all film? But she's at the end to pick them up. So, she finally decides to pull a finger out. Maybe she knew what Matilda was. And as soon as Matilda was vanquished, she's like, yes, I can come home. But there's this big age disparity between Caitlin and Michael that's just not explained. And cousin Larry becomes Larry, the romantic rival / helpful lawyer / guy in bits on Pontus Avenue, literally / even the end, which I thought was quite anticlimactic because you get a child, very much a repeat of the start of the film with Kyle losing a tooth, putting the tooth under the pillow, and nothing happens. Whereas originally there was supposed to be the sound effects of Matilda growling, she's still out there. It's that classic ending of, it's not really over. One nice thing about that, though, is that the child in that final scene is Aaron Gazzola, who was the runner-up to play Michael in the film. So even though he didn't make it to play, the lead child character, he still got brought on for a nice little cameo.
The final scene looks a lot like what the short film was that this was based on, that Joe Harris wrote and directed, called Tooth Fairy, which I think it's only a couple of minutes long, really, and it's not really anything, sadly, I don't feel.
I thought it was quite fun, especially the way that she mirrors the stitching on the bear's eyes.
Oh, yeah.
For 5 minutes, it is a very short.
Yeah, I just thought there was going to be a little more than we got.
Yeah.
But I guess that's also the thing with a short film, isn't it? When you want to try and adapt a short film into a feature, you've got a lot to fill out. And by the sounds of it, he clearly had an idea, but this just isn't the film he'd gone to make. And I don't think he's actually worked on a feature film since this. He wrote the web series for Ninjak versus the Valiant Universe for Fighting the Sun on YouTube, which is like the comic book thing of Valiant comics characters all teaming up or working together and fighting each other type thing. But other than that, I just don't think there's another film credit to him.
He did The Tripper, directed by David Arquette.
Oh.
And it stars Thomas Jane.
Sold.
Yeah, I'm in. I've watched that ASAP now. But
I wasn't very familiar with his work. That he'd worked on X-Files comics was quite interesting, though.
Yeah, I hadn't read them. I think I own the first one, but I'm not sure if his name's on that one. I've got issue 1 to season 10, director's got it. But I've just never read it because, I'll be honest, I'm that weird and I didn't want to devalue it. I guess because we've mentioned casting. You've seen it, who was going to play Caitlin. Sarah Michelle Gellar was considered, Reese Witherspoon and Kate Hudson.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine Reese Witherspoon being in this movie.
No.
Sarah Michelle Gellar, I can see being in it. Kate Hudson, I think I would have liked to have seen in it. Just because of her in that, I can't remember the name of that horror film she did.
Skeleton Key.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. I know Matt mentioned about the film supposing to be R-rated, which made it to some of the posters. It says NC-17 on the original posters, even though the film ended up being, as he said, PG-13.
Yeah. Bit bizarre. Had a load of stuff cut from it, so it's not really the film it was originally going to be at all, is it?
No.
But I still love it for what it is.
Yeah, Matt already said that this is the director's debut, and he didn't really want to do it anyway because he didn't like horror films. And I think for a horror film that's had such the struggles it had to get made, I think he did a great job with it, with the horror. Yeah. And then he went on to do the Texas Chainsaw The Beginning, which was a prequel to the Texas Chainsaw remake.
Yeah. I actually like both of them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the first one, the remake, it's the same cinematographer as the original Texas Chainsaw, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it reminds me, cinematographer for this, Dan Louston, did John Wick 2 to 4, Shape of Water, and Silent Hill. Good cinematographer, if you ask me.
Definitely varied in style as well. Although they all use light in a really good way.
Yeah, exactly. I think this does a good job with that as well.
The later John Wicks lean a little more into that like neo-noir style, don't they? So they look
Yeah,
quite darkly lit with pops of colour in the light and so on.
yeah.
I'm surprised you haven't brought it up yet, but it's one of your favourite people doing the music.
Brian Tyler.
Yeah.
So he kind of reunites with the writer Vanderbilt on the Scream 5 and 6, and then he reunites with the director on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2014 movie as well.
Yep. But I know he did one of your favourite films from 2003, Timeline. It's a John Crichton novel. Apparently, about half the score of this is shared with that film.
That really surprising me.
Does me?
I'll have to listen to the score for both of them.
Overall, though, how do the both of you feel about this film, though? More interested in Matt, to be honest, with this being his first watch.
I genuinely loved it. I thought it was very atmospheric. I think just the way I'm wired, I was picking up on the inconsistencies as I was watching it, but it didn't take me out of the film. It was still a really fun, rapidly paced experience. And then just digging into the behind-the-scenes stuff afterwards just elevated it for me. So I thoroughly enjoyed this, yeah.
Yeah, nice. I do like this film. It's one of the reasons I chose it. But I did actually want to choose Red Eye. And then I wanted to choose Shrooms, and I rewatched Shrooms, and I weren't as impressed with Shrooms as I remember, but I still do like Shrooms. I've got a lot of fun memories for Shrooms.
Am I getting the blame for vetoing Red Eye?
Yeah. After he watched The Cell, he says, how come you're allowed this and I won't allow Red Eye? And I said, look, The Cell is clearly more horror than what Red Eye is.
I mean, I got my family to watch Red Eye with me, so then knowing them with horror. Well, when there are terrorists shooting missiles at skyscrapers, I think I've got to sort of say, is it though? Wes Craven does not horror movie make. Hello. Great performances though.
Oh, for sure. I don't think Cillian Murphy's a big fan of that film, is he?
No.
You don't like it?
Really? Why?
Thinks it's an awful film.
He's great in it. He's really sinister.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I guess he's of the principle where it don't matter how bad the thing is as long as you're never bad at it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some actors that make a career by giving great performances in average movies, don't they? So,
yeah.
Nicolas Cage.
There you...
I'm glad you enjoyed it, because I just love sharing films with people and getting them to watch films. And I imagine other people in the film watching community do as well.
I'll happily watch this again, genuinely.
What's pretty much a 70-odd minute film. It's worth watching.
Yeah, we mentioned the 11-minute credits.
Yeah.
When they're lingering on, like, individual actors one after the other, it's just like, you're really stretching this, guys. What is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was to get it into cinema release, wasn't it? I mean, it's still credited as a feature film, because I think you only have to be about 40-something minutes long or 40 minutes long to count as a feature film.
Yeah.
But if you want it playing in cinemas, it needs to be a little longer. Weird rules, isn't it?
Well, 90 minutes is like it's the ideal one, because then you can get so many showings in a day, can't you? They don't want to go.
Imagine how many they'd have got if they didn't have 11 minutes of credits.
Yeah. They're doing a lot better money-wise.
Yeah.
I really don't know if it would have to be. I imagine there's a point where you have so many showings on in a day. I just added more showings won't really make a change anymore.
The vast majority of the audience will walk out anyway. My podcast is named Sitting Through the Credits for a reason. That's usually because I'm on my own a lot. By the time I consider a film has ended.
And you have all the people telling you there's nothing after the credits, you know.
You've essentially paid to see it.
It's nice to know where a film was shot, and I don't just do it for the sake of it.
I thought you did.
And then sometimes there are the extra little scenes at the end, but that's not the reason I do it.
But I'm glad you like this anyway, because I do like it. It is one of my, I don't like the term guilty pleasures, but it is one of my favourite kind of bad films. Do you know what I mean? Just not a fan of the guilty pleasure, because I don't feel you should be guilty for something you enjoy.
Oh, fair. Okay.
It's a term I'm not a big fan of. I recognise it as a film that people aren't going to particularly enjoy, because it is a little bit of a mess narratively more than anything, to be honest. Like, they did really well to just get something to finish, didn't they, really? And it be coherent to a sort.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's not quite the Room of horror movies, is it? But
I wonder what that would be. I feel like the mission now to find.
Big Shark. I'm still waiting for it. God, I hope it's good.
So we ready to move on? Any last thoughts on this before we do? Or
I think I've covered everything I've wanted to say.
Yeah, I think I have. Well, I don't feel I've said anything at the same time.
So, last but I hope not least, we've got Dead Silence, which was a film that came out in 2007.
There's an old ghost story around here about a woman named Mary Shaw.
The ventriloquist who lost her voice.
It had a $20 million budget, approximately, with a worldwide gross of only $22.38 million, though. So definitely not as successful as the first two films we've covered. It was directed by James Wan and written by Lee Winnell and James Wan. And the synopsis is, after his wife meets a grisly end, Jamie Ashen returns to his haunted hometown of Ravens Fair to find answers. His investigation leads him to the ghost of a ventriloquist named Mary Shaw, who seems to have ties to his entire family tree. So Dead Silence stars Ryan Quanten as Jamie Ashen, Amber Valletta as Ella Ashen, Donnie Wahlberg as Detective Lipton, Michael Fairman as Henry Walker, Joan Heaney as Marion Walker, Bob Gunton as Edward Ashen, and Judith Roberts as the villainous Mary Shaw. Who needs a dramatic introduction because she's great in this. I first came across this film about 5 years ago, so I didn't grow up with this. Yeah, I'm sure unlike a lot of people, I watched this without having seen Lee Whannell and James Wan's previous collaborative work, 2004 Saw, at the time. But yeah, what did you guys think? Because this was a first time watch for both of you.
I quite enjoyed it. To be fair, I was actually a bit shocked at the beginning because I didn't realise Lisa Ashen. I didn't realise she was just going to be off straight off. That came as a bit of a surprise to me.
It does dive straight in, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I was expecting it to build up the characters a bit more before doing so. I thought, tease that she's going to be off, but no, it just gets killed there and then. But yeah, it is. Yeah, Donnie Wahlberg is probably my favourite part of this film.
He brings all the comedy, really, doesn't it? To a film that is quite grim, really, across the board otherwise.
Yeah.
But I say quite grim, also very gothic and very classic horror is the vibe it's really going for, which is why I think I like it so much. I mean, you even get it opening with the 1930s classic Universal Pictures logo, so as me just go, yes, more of this, please.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Yeah, quite surprised by the Universal logo as well, to be honest. I don't really know why they used that, but it fit the film, I think.
I'd actually forgot about the Universal logo until you brought it up, but yeah, that is a nice touch, and it definitely sits well with the idea of going back to more of the traditional Victorian Gothic tropes and themes, even down into like the sins of your father sort of tropes that a lot of Gothic tales share.
Yeah, it definitely ties into that. I do like that opening where you see the plans and the construction of Billy, the puppet. It kind of reminds me a lot of Matilda Dixon's opening in Darkness Falls as well, how you get that. Just although it's less exposition heavy this time, it's more. It will tie in quite importantly later on, but for now, it's just a nice little way into the film to say, right, puppets, this is what you're in for.
Well, I also agree with Thomas. The opening, a bit of a shock, but I also feel it lacks a proper character introduction for Ryan Quanten's character. I can't remember his name.
Jamie.
Yes. I feel it leaves him feeling a bit like an empty void.
Especially because he then spends the rest of the movie very depressed and trying to sort of find answers. Yeah. You don't see him at his best, do you, before you see him?
No, he's always pursuing something and doing something. And through that, there's never that downtime where you actually get to learn a little bit about who he is as a person, to sympathise with him. I mean, there's little bits come up due to the family stuff later, but it'd be nice to be introduced to him and his partner properly at the very beginning. You know, because obviously they haven't been in that place very long, have they? It didn't seem, before the doll turns up. It felt like they'd been living there just recent, was it?
Oh, I'm actually not sure about that.
I think that...
I'm not sure. It'd have been nice if they'd have done a bit of a build on that first before the doll actually turns up, at least like a day or two with them settling into the place. Because they could have done like a recreational, what's the word? Like a self-reference shot. You know, they set up the place, they establish some shots and frames that they're going to use, and then they do it again with the doll, but then, oh, surprise, she's dead. It's not what you had in the first time. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I forget what they call it when they do that. But I think it would have been nice to have been a little settled into the house with them before the doll turns up and it all kicks off. Yeah, that's honestly my biggest problem with this film, that opening, just being too abrupt. Although I'm one of them weirdos, though. I always think, you know, you get a lot of people, they're like, oh, it could have done with 10 minutes off. Now I always think, really? I would have like 10, 20 minutes more.
Should be an extra hour.
But, I mean, this is one where I just think 5-10 minutes at the very beginning to just establish the characters nicely before it all happens. That is the downfall for me. Okay. I mean, other than that, I enjoyed it a lot up until towards the very end, which we'll get to eventually.
I mean, I love the ending, so that'll be fun to talk about. But yeah, got to talk about the music by Charlie Clouser, who's obviously most famous for his work on the Saw franchise. I really love the music in this. It's sort of a music box-esque. Yeah, it feels very vintage, but also it's quite sinister as well.
I think it was in its opening credits sounds like this is the garage it Saw.
Well, yeah, you straight away.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's got that sort of similar vibe to what the Saw theme has. The idea of something constructed, but just kind of off. So hard to talk about music, isn't it?
It's really obvious right at the end.
What, that it's the people who did Saw?
Yeah.
Oh,
as well.
But yeah, so we're introduced to, well, we've already seen the construction of Billy in the opening, but we're introduced to him properly when the box is just abandoned on their doorstep by a mysterious figure. So yeah, definitely don't trust boxes abandoned on your doorstep. And maybe when you open it and realise it's a ventriloquist dummy, just throw it out straight away, right?
I'd actually like a ventriloquist dummy for my collection.
Actually, I'll send one here.
No,
Bring it in.
I wouldn't accept it because I know that it's a bad omen to be sent a ventriloquist dummy.
Which they should know because it's their legend from their hometown. Because initially, part of me thought that Lisa is presumably from out of town, but no, because she's brought back to be buried in her hometown. So why is she just like, oh yeah, I remember that poem? And it's just like, well, of course you do. You've grown up with this, surely. They're all
I guess it depends which poem she remembers.
Yes. So there's the one that's used in the trailer, and then there's the one that's used in the film. You know, the one that's used in the film that's most well known is "Beware the stare of Mary Shaw. She had no children, only dolls. And if you see her in your dreams, be sure you never, ever scream." Whereas the one in the trailer, it was similar for the start up until she had no children, only dolls. And then it was, "And if you see her, do not scream. She'll rip your tongue out at the seam," which was going to tie into a few scenes that you've seen on the unrated cut, but which didn't make it into the theatrical cut.
Yeah, I'm assuming you've seen the unrated cut.
I haven't. No, I've seen the theatrical, and then I've watched the scene separately. Yeah, that's the version I've got digitally as well. That is the theatrical cut, which is my big problem with streaming services because they never tell you.
Yeah, they don't even always provide the option, and they should.
Yeah, it bothers me about Aliens that the one on Disney is it's just the theatrical cut, which is massively inferior. But we've talked about that before.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you've had that discussion on the one where I wasn't. Yeah,
you abandoned me in space, Brian. It's all right. You got away lightly.
Yeah, I abandoned you in space, but I wasn't there to abandon.
No, I'm saying Thomas did.
Yeah, I liked
Thomas did, yeah.
I won't bring him back. I'd had enough of him,
I mean, he's clearly made it back fine now, hasn't he?
unfortunately.
You're a good friend. So you get a lot of foreshadowing in the opening with Lisa. When Billy arrives, she says, "Oh, Jamie, you adopted as a baby." And then she puts like a rug under her top to make herself look like she's pregnant. So, you know, for people in the audiences that aren't paying attention, because that is sort of almost thrown in as a bit of a twist later on. But it's just like, well, yeah, obviously. Wasn't that, you know, hypertext really? But her death, I still think the jaw effect is great. The first time I watched it, I always, with the gimmick that Billy is basically, well, Billy is the vessel, we find out later on, but Billy is capable of just creating total silence. And the way they express that to the audience is they have lots of things making noise in the room that suddenly go quiet. So you've got the music that suddenly goes quiet. You've got the kettle that's boiling that suddenly stops whistling. But then you've got a clock that suddenly stops ticking. So the problem with that is obviously you think, oh, hang on, is he affecting time? But no, it's purely silence. But as a gimmick, I think it's wonderful because you've got, well, in reality, it's Mary that is using Billy as a vessel, really. She sort of lives inside the dolls. But that gimmick of making everything silent so she can jump scare you to death, I just think that is just a wonderful idea for a horror movie that almost excuses the thing that makes a lot of people roll their eyes, which is, oh, another jump scare. But no, this time it is actually quite critical. But yeah, I love the cinematography of this, how you get all of the washed out colour. Obviously, it was the same in Saw, but in Saw, the washed out colour was towards green rather than towards blue in this. It might be the bluest film I've ever seen. Apart from all the red, which is incredibly vibrant. It reminds me a lot of Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, the really bright reds in this.
Yeah.
I know the costume designer, she deliberately chose the brightest red she could possibly find. And I'm assuming there must have been some digital trickery afterwards to really pull that out. But yeah, that's just a really nice touch. Also, you do in the first scene where you see the book with Billy's diagrams and him being constructed, that's all lit by red candles, which will then appear later on, which is a nice foreshadowing touch. Yeah, and then once Jamie finds Lisa, and, you know, fortunately he's not defeated by a jump scare, you know, he's a proper protagonist. He's not going to scream. There's that absolutely mad transition where he's looking at Lisa's corpse, and then the camera zooms into his eye. Oh, no, hang on, no, the camera zooms back, doesn't it?
Yeah, it pulls away from his eye.
Wait,
well, it pulls away, and then you realise you're in his eye, doesn't it? It's like panning out from the scene, and then you're on a close-up of an eye.
Yeah,
and then it does it almost immediately after again.
Exactly. Yeah, whilst corpse is being removed from the scene of the crime. So to do that same shot twice, it's
that shot which kind of made me think Jamie is the killer.
Yes, I can see what you mean by that.
Because I thought it was like putting you in his mind, but no, it wasn't.
But it was that. that era where you had those sorts of stories. I mean, similarly with Darkness Falls, how you had Kyle was almost set up as, could it be him?
Yeah.
Got the same with Jamie here. Maybe less obviously that it was done with Kyle, though. But yeah, then we're introduced to the wonderful Donnie Wahlberg in this, who is one of the highlights of the film.
Definitely mine.
The way he's already he's shaving with his electric razor.
As soon as he pulled that out of his pocket and started shaving while he's questioning Jamie, I was like, I have no idea why he's doing that, but I love it.
The first time I thought, clearly a guy who was running late and couldn't shave before he got to work, and he just decided, I'm going to do it now. So I thought it was just a guy who was just, I don't know, a bit sloppy in his manner. But when he did it again later, and again, it just became laughable.
It's just such a weird character trait that then runs through the film.
Do you think scripted or a choice on his part, though?
I'd love to know.
If it's scripted, you think, okay, so there's clearly something missing now in the finished film that really explains this or says more about it than there is. But if it's a choice, Donnie Wahlberg was definitely on something.
But again, that odd character trait I thought was, you only see Donnie Wahlberg when Jamie seemed to be by himself. And the times Donnie Wahlberg showed up as well, I was just thinking, is Donnie Wahlberg even real in this? Is he a figment of Jamie's imagination? That kind of worked up until a certain point of the film. Not long after I suggested it to Brian while watching it. So it just made me seem like an idiot.
It is quite funny that Jamie pretty much immediately returns home. And even though there is some tape on the door, we just go straight in. The dummy's just been left there, so he takes that as evidence. And then we're off to Raven's Fair. And I've got to do a shout out to the classic car because I do love my cars. So that brilliantly red 1971 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. For me, it's almost a shame that the film wasn't a period piece and that it was, set in the 70s or something like that. Because other than there are some 1990s cars like the Taxi Cab and Detective Lipton's car, both Ford Crown Victorias. Other than that, it could very easily be a period piece, this film.
Well, I'd have loved that, to be honest. Ryan Quantel in like a nice vintage 70s leather jacket or something.
We do get another incredibly over-engineered transition of the car when it drives into Raven's Fair. So as it's going towards the bridge and into the town, the camera pans so that you see the sign, and then you see the car driving on the sign. But it's literally from a slightly different elevated angle, so it's just such a weird choice. You're seeing it go past, and it's also on the sign, just a few meters down the road. It's a very strange thing to do. I just think they were just having fun, experimenting with different techniques, really. Yeah, for lovers of 1950s bridge architecture, that bridge, sadly, the Badley Bridge, which is in Ontario, that was demolished in 2020, so you can't go and visit that anymore, sadly. But you've got Dead Silence as a permanent record. But another film shot in Canada, which, for me, it just automatically makes me think of American TV shows. Your Supernatural, X-Files. And I don't know why, but Canada just lends film and television just some real character, especially for these dark supernatural films. I don't know what you guys think.
I would put it down to the architecture that can be found there. Some of it also maybe like a nostalgia effect as well, because it's something you're familiar with.
Yeah, it's a fair shout.
I know architecture's probably one because America don't seem to hold on to anything historical for long, do they?
Well, I mean, America's still a relatively young country when it comes, in comparison to the rest of the world, which is why you get so many American horror movies that rely on Native American
burial
tropes. Yeah, or it's like superstitions that have come over that have their roots in European folklore. So
a lot of pagan stuff, isn't there, and stuff in a lot of American horror films.
Yeah, because of how religious a country it is as well, that, paganism is a real threat in their eyes. But yeah, when it came to them arriving at the house then, did you spot Julian Richings? He's briefly in there. It's like one shot.
If he's in
barely
there,
get a chance.
I don't think there was a line from him.
No, he's literally I think he's pushing the gate too, but he is in there. He is uncredited because of this. But yeah, so Julian Richings, who I know towards is probably most famous for playing Death in Supernatural.
Yeah.
But, a very storied acting career.
He's in Wrong Turn, the original Wrong Turn.
Oh, is he? Oh, was it Finger? Something Finger. Is it Little
character back there, isn't he?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Three Finger.
Three Finger. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in this, Julian Richings plays Foz, who had quite an extensive part in the film, which was then deleted because it tied into an unused ending, which I think we'll cover later. But yeah, so we're introduced to Amber Valletta, who plays Ella, Jamie's stepmom. So she, very famous supermodel at the time. For sort of fans of supernatural films, she also played, the other woman in both Premonition and in What Lies Beneath. And in this, you could argue that she plays the other woman again. I mean, she is Jamie's stepmom Jamie's had a fair few stepmoms, as we're about to find out. we're introduced to Edward, who is Jamie's dad, played by the absolutely legendary Bob Gunton, who's most famous to most people from playing the prison warden in The Shawshank Redemption. So we're quickly made aware that he's had a stroke, and it's alluded to that Jamie's maybe been the victim of domestic violence at the hands of his father. His wives definitely have. And we also see all the paintings in the house, and it's just wonderfully gothic and just really sinister. There are all these paintings with these empty chairs where the wives have been painted out. So you've got, Jamie's dad and Jamie, and I love the fact that Jamie's returned home for each of these family portraits. So it's just Jamie and his dad just posing by an empty chair. It's just really sinister, and it doesn't really marry with the performance he's giving, although there was a deleted scene from Boz where he said, he's changed. Yeah, the excuse for it is because of the stroke that he's had, and that can change a man. And he's no longer the violent father he has been in the past. But yeah, so we get the funeral home, and Henry Walker and his wife, who has the ability to communicate with Billy later on, we find. Although in reality, that's her communicating with Mary Shaw and not Billy. And the voices aren't actually in her head. When it comes to Lisa's funeral, that is, it's very emo music video, isn't it? It's straight out of an Evanescence music video or a My Chemical Romance music video, where it's very black and white and stylized. And that's the part where we are introduced to Mary Shaw's grave, and we see all of the little gravestones. And so she's not only has she been buried in this graveyard, she's been buried with all of her puppets. They all have their own grave. And that's why Jamie then returns to the grave to bury Billy. And then you get this, which is, I imagine, the moment where you realise that Lipton wasn't in Jamie's head.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, it makes absolutely no sense at all. So Jamie buries Billy, fair enough. Then you get Billy running around the car, like peering through the window, trying to jump scare Jamie. Everything goes silent again. So we know it's Mary Shaw doing this. Oh, and before this, we've even glimpsed Mary Shaw in the hotel with a wonderful scene with the flashing red light. And, Billy's eyes move when Mary's sort of animating him. Although at the time we don't realise that. But yeah, so Jamie ostensibly buries Billy. Even though he sees Billy, he presumably thinks it's just his imagination, so drives off. But then Lipton turns up with the puppet. It's just like, well, why did you bury me, Jamie? So animating the puppet. It's so much fun. So Lipton has either followed him, dug Billy up, and it was in Jamie's head, but he says that Jamie has buried him. So did Lipton just undig Billy, and was he the one running Billy around the car? I need answers.
This is the thing. Lipton could have been in his head at this point.
You still think at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do actually, yeah. I think it's only a bit after this, really, where it's like, nah, can't be.
Yeah.
It adds up to be, I think. But it don't make any sense, really, of why he would imagine a detective after him, unless it's guilt.
Yeah. I suppose just because he wasn't there when Lisa died, that's enough to feel guilty, isn't it?
Yeah. So it kind of worked how it played out.
I do love the scene where Lipton's just talking to Billy, saying, I notice you have very smooth skin. What's your secret? I don't know. That doesn't work for me. So when it comes to Mary Shaw, though, Dead Silence does sort of rely on the trope of villainous, childless women. So you've got the idea that, that there are characters with a need to satiate their desire to have children of their own. So they either steal children or they use stand-ins. So in Mary Shaw's case, that's primarily with puppets, but we later learn that she is also stealing children, or at least one child. The idea that their childlessness is the reason that they are psychopaths, which is a pretty cruel stereotype. But it's also one that's reflected in literature. So you've got Lady Macbeth, famously, Miss Havisham, the way that she brings Pip and Estella, and she's trying to use the child to gain her revenge.
I was going to say the woman in the attic as well from, oh my God, what's it called? Bronte.
Jane Eyre?
Yeah, Jane Eyre.
I ain't even read it.
You haven't even read it?
I did say to you while watching this, this could be a novel.
Yeah. But I mean, Mary's kind of similar to the Woman in Black in some respect. But what might be considered the biggest issue with Mary is that she's got no sympathetic element. It could have been the case that she could be the victim of vigilante justice, which she is, but she could have been innocent. And so her revenge, whilst extreme, would then be justifiable. But instead, she's absolutely guilty and she's made irredeemable. So to a certain level, I like this decision. It makes her a more malevolent force that is as psychotic in death as she was in life. Because you get this really great flashback where she's just doing her act. Ventriloquism is her act, and she's clearly very good at it. But one of the children calls her out saying that, I can see her lips moving. And then has a scene where her and Billy are almost talking at exactly the same time. Although James Wan has said, no, she's just amazing at her act. It isn't alive. Billy is never alive in the film. It's always just a puppet that is animated by Mary, a skilled ventriloquist. But to get her revenge, she then steals the child, who calls her out, and just turns him into a living puppet, which comes back later on, which is a great scene. The theatre, which is her lair, that's the Guignol Theatre. So that obviously references Grand Guignol, which was a horror theatre in Paris that existed between the 1890s and the 1960s. But that term has since become it's a more general term to describe graphic horror entertainment that is considered to be amoral. And obviously ventriloquism, that's, horror entertainment in the most classic sense, really, which is why, that sort of classic vintage flavour is what really works for me with this film.
Yeah, that's particularly what I liked, but I think it's the fact that it's not an old story that lets it down, if that makes sense. If it was actually set in the past, like you mentioned earlier, I feel that would work a little better.
So were it to just immediately follow Mary's tongue being cut out by the vigilantes, if it just immediately followed on from that, you think?
Or around that era, yeah, and
Yeah.
not more further back. But, maybe like a period piece and just push everything a little further back to really play into the tropes a little nicer. Because for me, it's the blend of that, the contemporary setting, but with these past tropes, it kind of lets it down for me. Even though it's still not a big letdown for me, but I would just rather, just like I said, the biggest problem for me is not really having a proper character introduction at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
The doll designs and so on, they're just terrific.
Yeah, I really love them.
Dolls are creepy anyway, aren't they? You don't have to do much with a doll for it to be creepy.
There's a couple of really famous ones that make their appearance in this as well. Actually, three technically. So Edgar Bergen's doll, Charlie McCarthy's on one of the shelves later on, and a doll that Lipton throws over his shoulder is a replica of famous ventriloquist Jimmy Nelson's doll, which was called Danny O'Day. But also, Billy the puppet from the Saw franchise also has a little cameo in the doll room scene. Just before the clown doll is revealed, he's propped up against a support, which is a nice little tip of the cap.
I think the Billy doll in the Saw is only called Billy due to this. I don't think it's ever referred to Billy in the Saw films as Billy, is it?
Not that I know.
Yes, you've got Detective Lipton. That's it's strange that his name is exactly the same as his character from the TV series Band of Brothers, because he plays Carwood Lipton in that, who's obviously a real soldier who served in the 101st Airborne. I don't know if it was just it doesn't matter what the detective's name is, we'll just use that, just a strange homage or just laziness. To be honest, I don't really remember them saying Lipton that much in the film, so it's mostly because of the credits, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to think it's a coincidence, but I'm not a big believer in coincidences when there's something this coincidental.
Yeah. As much as I love this film, I know Lee Winnell, not one of his favourites, because after working on this film, he decided to only write spec scripts without studio interference. He had a really bad experience with this. And I think a lot of that is down to the script for Dead Silence was almost an insurance policy against Saw, which they had much greater creative control of. But, just in case it failed, this was on the back burner, ready to go.
Yeah, I don't understand. Obviously, I haven't read the original script, but I'm curious what it is that he's not happy with about this, for the fact that James Wan directed it. And they've been good friends, but I know they kind of split up at some point. But I believe they're both working on Insidious together, don't they? And so on. So they've still got a professional working relationship, it seems.
Oh, yeah.
I just wonder what it is that's wrong with this for him, that he's not happy with it. The studio interference, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. I think when you've got a writer of Lee's caliber and a director of James's, visual flair, it's almost impossible to get those two people working on a project and not to have their ideas and their vision bleeding through, no matter how much a studio does interfere. So that, I think, is probably why the film works as well as it does.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that, as well as the unrated cut and the theatrical cut, it also has a lot of deleted scenes that all led up to a completely unused ending for this film. So the unrated cut, the only real differences are this scene when Henry is killed. Henry's lured into this crawl space underneath his funeral home by Mary. And just before Mary gets him, there is a CGI tongue that shoots out, which the tongue is made of a series of tongues stitched together. And then Mary, as she claims Henry's tongue, she says, "I have your voice now, Henry." And the scene is much the same otherwise. And personally, I prefer it in the theatrical cut because, the CG hasn't aged very well, but it just flows nicer. I think it's just a better sequence. And similarly, again, when they find the clown puppet in the theatre, when Jamie leans in close, of course, this does make more sense to have left in, because then Mary's series of tongues shoots out of the clown's mouth and licks Jamie. And that not being in the theatrical cut, it makes less sense. The reason why she's like, "Oh, come closer so I can whisper to you," is so that she can reveal the twist that Lisa was pregnant. And that is supposed to make him scream. Whereas, if there's actually licking his face at the same time, that's obviously a bit more likely to make him scream, I imagine. But yeah, so they're the only two differences between the unrated and the theatrical. What is more interesting is the deleted scenes, because there are a lot of deleted scenes featuring Boz, as I mentioned. And that is essentially every time he goes home, Boz greets him and they have a slight conversation, usually to the effect of, he hasn't changed at all. Boz saying, oh no, he's changed since Ella came. He's a better man now. And in one of those interactions, Jamie says, right, the entire time you've known my father, he's never let you set foot in the house once. Go in there, look him in the eye, and tell me if he's changed. And that leads to Boz's death, because the last time that Jamie returns home, he finds both Ella's corpse in the corridor and Boz's corpse. It's another jump scare attempt where Mary tries to lure him through a door using Boz's voice, who she's also stolen his tongue, obviously. He opens the door and finds him with his jaw hanging. It's a really good effect, that. And then Boz's voice literally saying, oh, Jamie, I only came in here because of you. So then Jamie at least feels guilty for that. Jamie's words led to Boz's death, essentially, an innocent groundsman. But that was to set up this ending where, so we now think Ella's dead, but then it shows you in the reveal. Well, should we talk about the film's theatrical reveal first? Because what did you guys think of that? Because I absolutely love it.
We've only seen the unrated cut.
That reveal is the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the reveal, I was just putting it all together as it just did the reveal. I was like, I think I've got this. And then it did the classic Saw style reveal. It kind of upset me they went that route because it just makes them feel a bit like a one-trick pony. But I think that's just because I love Saw and I've seen Saw so many times that it just felt like, oh, it doesn't matter what they're going to do. They're just going to try and do a, don't worry, we're a step ahead of you the whole time kind of thing. I mean, I don't hate the ending. I just was a little disappointed with the ending being that.
Okay. I just think it's just delightfully mad. Just the idea that his dad the whole time has been a ventriloquist dummy. His back is literally hollowed out, even to the extent that he has a working chute so that Ella can fake feed him,
feed him
into a nice little bowl that slots into his back. It's just madness, and I love it. Even his suit is like a ventriloquist dummy suit. And I know Bob Gunton had a lot of fun making this because they cast his face and actually made a replica of him. He was sat there saying, well, make sure you've got all the nose hairs right. He had a lot of fun making this. This was really nice to see. So you've got the twist. Well, initially they set you up with a fake twist because they say that Mr. Ashen came and picked Billy up. It's just like, my dad can't walk, he's in a wheelchair. And then they show like a flashback of him walking. Oh no, it's the dad. And then not only is it the dad, it's the dad who's actually a puppet who's being operated by the stepmom. And then it follows that up with the stepmom is a ventriloquist dummy that's being possessed by Mary. She isn't real. That, you know, of course she looks like a supermodel, because if you're going to make the perfect dummy, you're going to make her look like the most attractive person on the planet, aren't you? And they even have the scene where they flick the face onto the fake dummy and it's Amber Valletta's face. It's madness, and I think it's so funny. It's great.
It's funny and it's mad. I just feel it kind of lets itself down with that. I mean, I have to watch it all, but I'm not going to lie about that.
So would you have preferred the alternate ending?
I don't know what that is.
So, now, admittedly, this does get a bit confused. So, in the alternate ending, they find Ella, Amber Valletta's character, her corpse in the corridor. But then her corpse is animated by Mary. So, presumably in this version, she isn't a ventriloquist dummy at all. Mary's finally learned that she can possess people as well as puppets. It's revealed earlier on that Henry Walker is taking photos of dead bodies posed, so that, you know, family photos of posed dead bodies. But then also that Mary's been slaughtering the townspeople. So they found these people dead, already posed, with their tongues ripped out. So that ties back into this alternate ending where Mary, inhabiting Ella's body, poses everyone up in a nice family photo, including Lisa's body, who she's dug up and propped up on the sofa. Edward, who isn't even Edward, he's a puppet of Edward, but close enough, I guess. And then as she takes the photo, or, you know, sets it on a timer, Jamie screams, end of movie. But then there was also an alternate ending where Jamie's in bed and she's reading him the poem, and there's Jamie's voice coming out of Jamie's corpse. So presumably Mary is just like using her ventriloquist skills and is just giving him a voice. He's not him at all. Mary's just talking to her, you know, pretending to be Jamie in this instance. And then it ends with her saying that, oh, if you do see Mary Shaw, the one thing that can save you is silence. And she blows out the candle, end of film. Would you have preferred one of those two endings?
Especially the first one you said out those two. Yeah, I would have anyway, yeah.
One less dummy.
You referred to me now.
Now who's the dummy? Oh, Judith Roberts is amazing in this, though. She was a veteran stage actress, and she's so sinister. There's a scene where she just like is gliding down a corridor in the Grignol Theatre, and it like cuts to her, cuts away, cuts back to her, cuts away, and it does it a few times. But she's just looked so emotionless, and it's really, it's a wonderful performance.
Yeah, she's actually like a really good art in this film in general, to be honest. It's what helps keep it in the creep factor, I guess. Just adds to the thrill, doesn't it? The ghost and so on.
I didn't mention it, that scene where there's a flashback to Henry as a child because his dad previously worked in the funeral home, and part of her will, as well as being buried with her 101 ventriloquist dummies, it was for her to actually be turned into a dummy herself. So with the hinged jaw, when she first rolls out of the casket because Henry knocks it, but then she immediately is just like in the corner. So she's immediately got that power to, well, as a ghost. I just think she's wonderfully sinister in this, and I'd have happily. There were plans to do a sequel, which just never materialised, presumably because of how badly it did.
It never got a sequel because of its poor box office, apparently.
Yeah.
And I don't want to upset you, but I actually wrote good next to that.
I don't really know what they do for a sequel.
She won. She killed the whole town.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and she left the family to blame till last. So, yay.
Yeah, what do you do from there?
Just merry, chilling. Do you like House of Wax? Puppets everywhere, and she's just giving voices to them all.
I was thinking something like Muppet.
A really sinister version.
Yeah, I'm not sure how, but my first thought was like, you like Muppet?
That'd be a wonderful idea, just Kermit sinisterly turning his head. There's no hand in him! I'd absolutely watch that film.
I mean, if it's just Kermit turning his head, that's not going to be a very long film.
In a sinister way.
It's still not a very long film.
We've got Charlie Clouser doing the music.
Do you wonder if the addition of Donnie Wahlberg's character was added later, like he weren't in the original draft?
He brings a lot of comedy.
The idea
doesn't
that's just dawned on me now, because not just that, but his name being Lipton, obviously, it's like, oh, we need a name for him quick. Because he's not really serving anything to the plot at all, is he?
I do like that he's quite intelligent towards the end. You know, he brings the shotgun, and then when they're confronted with those 101 puppets, or 100 puppets, you know, he doesn't take much motivation to start shooting them. I love the line where it's just like, if I see another one of these things, and then they reveal an entire case full to the front of them all.
It was the shotgun thing that had me think of him maybe being a later addition, you know, just to add a bit of an action scene into the film.
Yeah, true.
I just want to know what happened to his partner.
Maybe he went to the shops to get him a razor. Spoiler alert. I love when he finally dies and when he's whisked out of the, through the curtains and then sort of like pushed back through as like a ta-da, with his jaw just hanging down.
Yeah.
But then when he falls to the ground, the razor falls to the ground with him and he's just sat there buzzing. It's just, that's tongue-in-cheek humour. That's good fun. And like even when the clown first appears and he's just like, don't go over there. He's actually quite smart, and it doesn't take much motivation to suddenly believe Jamie. He doesn't like say, no, this isn't real. This isn't real. Eventually, this is real. Start shooting the puppets. So yeah, I like him for that.
The movie won't be the same without him, would it really?
Well, especially because he's not got a full tank of gas, which is just, that's a weird thing to shout after someone you're supposed to be chasing. Just the irritation. It's just like,
It's generally one of them thoughts you can imagine a cop having, though, when they need to pursue a victim. So, like, to just, like, say it out loud, it's not something you would think about until it's been said, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a nice piece to be said.
Yeah.
I'm good I've not seen it be said in anything else, I'll be honest. Like in a Jason Bourne or something, in a Bourne film, when they're chasing him.
For a car chase scene, yeah. Don't go too far. I think we've pretty much covered it, haven't we?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So how would you guys rank these three then?
The Cell is first for me. It's more my style of thing. Serial killers, and I quite like the idea of the dream stuff. And then Darkness Falls and Dead Silence, I would probably put joint second. As much as I enjoy Darkness Falls, it's just not particularly coherent, but I have fun with the cast. Whereas Dead Silence, just Donnie Wahlberg alone makes this worth watching, and the dolls thing. Because I love a villain that's really theatrical, and that's what we've got here.
How about you, Thomas?
Obviously, The Cell is my number one. It's one of my favourite films. But I think I'll have to put Dead Silence at the bottom, even though I do enjoy Donnie Wahlberg.
And poor Mary Shaw.
She won.
Exactly. She's doing it for all those killers and villains out there that inevitably fail.
I'd put Darkness Falls above it because I don't know. I just really enjoy it. I don't know why. There's just something about it. Plus, it's like 70-odd minutes. It's not that long.
Very breezy.
Yeah. Dead Silence, Darkness Falls. They're kind of on a par, but I just get more excitement out of Darkness Falls.
If Dead Silence had done a gag with Donnie Wahlberg about having a close shave after just scraping death, I may have put it above Darkness Falls by just a hair.
Oh.
I just think you can't have a character just shave on scene like this and not acknowledge it. It's like he's not shaving at all.
That's why I thought he was just a figment of his imagination.
Well, for me, and it's purely nostalgia, but Dead Silence is top for me. I really love the atmosphere. The characters, just Mary Shaw as a villain, it all just works for me. That being said, all three of these are really close. The Cell and Darkness Falls, both a first-time watch. Darkness Falls, I had a lot of fun with it. Honestly, I could spend a day discussing all the problems with it. And, you know, if you're really going to sit down and sort of debate, is this a good film? You know, from a practical process of making a coherent story with coherent characters, with coherent motivations. Because you've got, you know, these characters are not technically the same in between scenes. It's that mad. At the same time, it was a lot of fun. The atmosphere was wonderful. Matilda Dixon, I think, is a great villain. Could have been better in a lot of respects, but it's a fun film that's very quick. It doesn't overstay its welcome at all. Meanwhile, The Cell, which was a real surprise for me, just incredibly artistic, and it just taps into a lot of things I like. The psychology of, you know, trying to understand the killer, who's really in control of this situation, the murder mystery element. It was a really good watch, and we could definitely tell it had the highest production value of the three. I'm genuinely surprised that it's not more talked about. I can understand a lot of the issues that people have with it, but, you know, liking modern art just sort of elevates it. If you're a fan of modern art and if you're aware of some of the references, you're just going to get so much out of that film, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that what you've just said, especially about The Cell. I don't even think you'd have to be particularly familiar with modern art to get stuff out of The Cell. Not just if you're familiar with some of the music and the videos that are lifted from those videos, then you'd get an extra layer out from watching it, I imagine. I'm not familiar with the music videos, and I imagine that would really add something when you're watching it.
Yeah,
but it sounds like it's you being familiar with the art.
Yeah, I wonder if someone's made a list of all the music videos that it sort of pulls from. And inspired, because it both took ideas from previous ones, but also inspired future music videos, didn't it, Zach?
Yeah, genuinely think it's nice though that we've managed to find films that the others hadn't seen. I mean, it's hard for me and Thomas to find a film that one of us hasn't seen the other. We normally say the others pretty much quickly, or we've watched them at the same time anyway.
Yeah,
I definitely appreciated that. Yeah, thanks for that.
I'm glad.
Would you like to plug yourself one more time?
Absolutely, shamelessly. Right. So I'm Matt from Sitting Through the Credits. My podcast digs deep into behind-the-scenes production details from movies old and new, covering a mixture of cult films and some of my favourites. My podcast is available on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, YouTube, all of the major podcast apps, really. So if you like your film history and always stay to the end of the credits on your cinema visits, then this is the podcast for you.
Yeah, it is definitely a podcast worth listening to. I've listened to some. I can't listen to all of them because Matt's done some quite historic films of importance that I've not watched yet. And I know it will spoil them if I listen to his podcast first, but he does a great job at finding the information and weaving it into a lovely tapestry of a podcast to listen to and cover that film.
Very kind. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me on as well.
Thank you for joining us.
You're more than welcome. I'm sure you'll end up being on again at some point.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for coming. Ironic, isn't it, to talk about Dead Silence?
So that's the end of the show. Thank you for joining us this week. And if you haven't already, click like and subscribe. A glowing review would also be appreciated. We are cynic_critique on X and Instagram. Links to those and more can be found in the show's description. Remember to join us next week as we try to catch a flight with 2005's Flight Plan and Red Eye. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Does anybody remember seeing the girl?
No.
No, sir.
What aren't you telling me? What aren't you telling me?